I think we should just be friends. Livia needs me more than you do. For a moment, I thought I'd heard him wrong. We stood beneath the flickering security light behind his apartment building. The pavement still damp from the afternoon rain. My fingers tightened around the silver car key hidden inside my coat pocket, the anniversary surprise I'd spent weeks planning. Instead of giving it to him, I looked him in the eye. Is that really what you want? Relief crossed Ethan's face. I don't want to hurt you, Natalie. That was the first lie he told me that night. People who truly don't want to hurt you don't begin by explaining why someone else deserves them more. My name is Natalie Carter. I was 30 years old, a freelance photographer, and I'd spent the last 3 years building a life with Ethan Brooks, an accountant who loved routines, spreadsheets, and certainty. We balanced each other surprisingly well. He kept my chaotic schedule organized, and I reminded him life wasn't meant to fit neatly inside a calendar. For years, everything between us felt steady until Olivia Grant came back. She had dated Ethan in college before disappearing from his life. He used to describe her as reckless, unreliable, and always chasing the next opportunity. Suddenly, she was back in Portland wearing designer suits, driving a black BMW, and talking about investors, startups, and business success. At first, Ethan told me everything. Olivia messaged me, he said one evening. What does she want? She needs advice about one of her companies. And she called her ex-boyfriend? He laughed. She trusts my financial judgment. That's all. I believed him because trust shouldn't require checking phones or demanding explanations. But over the next few weeks, Olivia's emergencies became routine. Business advice turned into dinner meetings, late-night calls, and constant interruptions until Ethan sounded less like an ex offering advice and more like someone responsible for fixing her life. She doesn't have anyone else, he insisted. You're starting to sound like she's your responsibility. I'm just helping someone who once mattered to me. That was all I needed to hear. A few nights later, we were having dinner at our favorite diner when his phone lit up. Dinner tonight? I need to talk. Oh, he turned the screen over so quickly it rattled his fork against the plate. You're not going to ask. I already know who it is. He sighed. It's Olivia. She needs help again. Funny how you're always the one she needs. You're making this into something it isn't. No, you're deciding what it is. He had no answer. By then, I'd already bought his anniversary gift. Months earlier, he'd admired a silver crossover outside a dealership. I quietly picked up extra photography jobs, sold old camera lenses, and bought it for him. The dealership planned to deliver it on our anniversary, and the spare key had stayed in my coat pocket ever since. The night before our anniversary, he called. Can you come over? We need to talk. The moment I heard his voice, I knew that key would never leave my pocket. Standing beneath the flickering parking lot light, Ethan skipped every apology and went straight to the reason. Olivia needs me. She understands parts of me that you don't. And you want to be with her. I don't know what's going to happen. That wasn't my question. His silence answered it. I left the key where it was. All right, I said. I hope you're happy. His expression shifted with surprise. That's it. You already made your choice. You're only telling me because you want to feel better about it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Maybe he'd expected me to cry. Maybe he'd expected me to fight for him. I did neither. I walked back to my car while he called my name, the unused key pressing against my pocket with every step. It was supposed to be the beginning of our future. Instead, it became the reminder of the future I refused to waste on the wrong person. I thought the pain would hit the moment I drove away. Instead, I felt relief. I believed the parking lot was the end of our story. I couldn't have been more wrong. Months later, Ethan would show up at my front door in the middle of the night with strangers filming behind him. But that night, I drove home with the car key still in my pocket. And for the first time in months, my life entirely my own. The grief I expected never arrived. Instead of replaying old conversations, I slept through the night, accepted new photography assignments, and threw myself back into the work I'd neglected while trying to save a relationship that had already ended. The more I travelled, the more alive my photographs became. My editor noticed it immediately. These feel different, she said. Quieter, but stronger. Looking back, she wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped chasing perfect photographs and started capturing honest moments instead. A few months later, gallery owner Marissa Vale invited me to discuss a solo exhibition after seeing one of my photographs in a travel magazine. I almost deleted her email, assuming it was spam. What would you call the collection? She asked during our meeting. Stillness. The exhibition exceeded every expectation. Most of the collection sold during the opening weekend. You realize this changes your career, Marissa said. I laughed. I was hoping it would at least pay my rent. It'll do much more than that. Walking home that evening, I realized something unexpected. I no longer cared whether Ethan ever found out. His opinion had quietly stopped mattering. That was when people started updating me on his life. People occasionally mentioned Ethan, usually pretending the news had come up by accident. I saw him last week, Claire said over lunch. How is he? He seems happy. He and Olivia moved in together and she's bringing him into one of her companies. Then I hope it works out. Claire studied me. You really mean that? I've accepted that he made his choice. I don't need to keep living inside it. Over the next few weeks, photos of them filled social media. Olivia posed beside her black BMW. Ethan wore an expensive watch he'd never have bought before. And every caption celebrated second chances and finding the person you were always meant to be with. One post stopped me. Some people meet too early and spend years becoming ready for each other. Beneath it, Ethan had commented, worth every mistake. 3 years together had been reduced to a single sentence. I muted both of their accounts and moved on. Not long afterward, the image they projected began to crack. Rumours spread that Olivia's companies were struggling. Investors wanted answers. Legal complaints surfaced. And people discovered the BMW was leased. The luxury apartment was financed through business credit, and neither company was nearly as successful as she'd claimed. Then Claire called. Someone said Ethan used almost all of his savings to cover one of Olivia's loans. I paused. How much? No one knows, but apparently, almost everything. That account had taken him years to build. Now he was emptying it to save the woman who had promised him a perfect future. Did he ask you to tell me? No. Then don't tell him we talked. Claire hesitated. You're really not going to help? He didn't leave because he had nowhere else to go. He left because he believed someone else could give him a better life. That doesn't make me responsible for rescuing him now. Within a few months, everything unraveled. Olivia's world collapsed almost as quickly as it had appeared. Former employees accused her of unpaid wages, investors demanded answers, and Ethan emptied the rest of his savings chasing one promise after another. By winter, he had lost the apartment, moved into a friend's spare room and resigned from his accounting job, while rumours spread that his employer had been preparing an internal investigation into transactions tied to Olivia's businesses. Then Claire texted me. I saw Ethan today. He had bruises on his arm. Did he say what happened? He claimed he fell. A minute later, another message appeared. A former neighbour said debt collectors came looking for Olivia. They tried to repossess her leased BMW. Ethan got involved, and the confrontation turned physical. I set my phone aside and looked out the window. There was no satisfaction in watching Ethan's life collapse. He hadn't been ruined by bad luck. He had trusted the wrong person and mistaken being useful for being loved. 2 weeks later, Olivia vanished. Her office was empty, her phone disconnected, and the leased BMW was abandoned in an airport parking garage. She left behind unpaid employees, angry investors, and several financial agreements carrying Ethan's signature. I heard the news while preparing my second exhibition with Marissa. Bad news? She asked. I locked my phone and smiled. Old news? That evening, I placed the signed gallery contract beside the silver car key in my desk drawer. One reminded me of the future I'd almost given away, the other of the one I'd built after walking away. By spring, Ethan had quietly disappeared from my thoughts. Around that time, I accepted a magazine assignment along the Oregon coast, where I met the project's editor, Daniel Hayes. We clicked almost immediately. You've got a camera that's probably older than half our staff, he joked. It still works. So do you. Over the following weeks, we worked, travelled and argued over photography, books and travel stories until friendship came naturally. One afternoon, Daniel studied one of my recent photographs. Your work has changed. How? It doesn't look like it's waiting for someone anymore. I let out a quiet laugh. I think that's progress. So do I. A few weeks later, over takeout after a long editing session, he finally asked about Ethan. You almost never mention your ex. There's nothing left to say. You're not angry? No. Then what are you? I spent too long believing I wasn't enough. Daniel shook his head. You believed the wrong person. His words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. As the months passed, Daniel became the easiest person I'd ever known. There were no games or mixed signals, just honesty. Then my phone rang. Unknown number? Natalie. I recognized Ethan instantly. What do you need? Everything spilled out at once. Olivia had taken his savings, retirement account, and left him buried in debt. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he admitted. I miss you. No, I said quietly. You miss stability. You miss having someone who never lied to you. I loved you. I think you loved the version of me that made your life easier. I've changed. I hope you have. Can we meet? No. Please. The woman who would have said yes doesn't exist anymore. I hope you build a better life. Then I ended the call. Daniel looked up from his laptop. Your ex? He's finally living with the consequences of his own choices. You don't sound happy. I'm not. Sad? No. Then what? I leaned back in my chair. Finished. 3 days later, Ethan started posting vague messages online about betrayal, career women, and being abandoned. He never mentioned my name, but everyone who knew us understood exactly who he meant. Claire called immediately. Are you going to respond? No, but people are asking questions. If I spend my life defending myself against every lie, I'll never have time to live. What if it gets worse? It probably will. I was right. 3 months later, just after midnight, someone began pounding on my front door hard enough to shake the entire townhouse. Daniel looked up from the couch. You expecting anyone? I shook my head. Another series of violent bangs echoed through the house. Natalie! I pulled back the curtain. Ethan stood outside in the rain, soaked and exhausted. 3 strangers stood behind him, each holding up a phone. They're filming, Daniel said. I know. Another bang rattled the door. Open the door! Daniel called 911 while I opened the security camera app. Every camera around the townhouse came online, covering the porch, driveway, and side entrance. Years behind, a camera had taught me one thing. People remembered emotions, but cameras remembered facts. As Ethan paced outside, one of the people filming whispered, "Make sure she comes outside." Another replied, "This is going to go viral." I understood immediately. Ethan hadn't come for a conversation. He wanted a public confrontation that could be edited into a few dramatic seconds online. I unlocked the door. You don't have to do this, Daniel said. I know. I'll stay right here. With the dispatcher still on the speaker, I stepped onto the rain-soaked porch. Relief flashed across Ethan's face. Natalie, you finally came out. What are you doing here? You ignored my calls. I blocked your number. You don't understand what Olivia did. I understand enough. His expression shifted. You knew. I knew she was using you. You could have warned me. I shook my head. You left because you believed she was your future. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Behind him, someone filming moved closer, but I ignored the phone pointed at my face. Then Ethan noticed Daniel standing in the doorway. So that's him. You replaced me. No, I answered. You removed yourself. Rainwater streamed from his jacket. I lost everything. My apartment, my savings, my career. I know. And you don't care. I cared when we were together. His face tightened. How can you be so cold? I learned from the person who walked away first. For a moment, the anger disappeared. I saw the exhausted man I'd once loved. Then he looked at Daniel. The jealousy returned instantly. You stole her. Daniel gave a short laugh. No, you threw her away. Silence settled over the porch. Even the people recording lowered their phones slightly. Realizing he was losing control, Ethan took another step toward me. I just need your help. There it was. The real reason you came? He froze. You didn't drive here in the middle of the night because you missed me. I glanced at the people filming behind him. You brought an audience because you wanted everyone to watch me refuse, hoping I'd feel guilty enough to rescue you. You wanted me to pay your debts. He never denied it. Before he could say another word, blue lights reflected across the wet street. The police had arrived. One officer approached me while the other stopped Ethan. Ma'am, did you call? Yes. My ex-boyfriend has been pounding on my door for nearly 15 minutes. I just wanted to talk, Ethan interrupted. The officer glanced at the 3 strangers still holding their phones. Were all of you invited here? No one answered. I have security footage, I said, handing over my phone. The officers watched the recordings from every camera, the pounding on my door, Ethan shouting, the people discussing how the confrontation would go viral, and his repeated attempts to pressure me into coming outside. When the video ended, the officer handed my phone back and turned to Ethan. You need to leave immediately. If you return, you may be arrested for trespassing and harassment. The crowd Ethan had brought dissolved almost instantly. Before following the officers, he looked at me one last time. I never thought you'd become this person. I met his eyes. I finally became someone you can't control. As he was escorted away, he shouted across the street. You'll regret not saving me. I waited until the patrol car disappeared before quietly answering. No, Ethan, that's your regret, not mine. Inside, Daniel squeezed my hand. You okay? I glanced at the security monitor, showing nothing but rain falling across an empty porch. I just closed the last door to my old life. I thought that night had closed the final chapter. I had underestimated how desperate Ethan had become. By sunrise, edited clips of the confrontation were circulating online. They showed Ethan standing in the rain, but cut off before the police arrived, making it look as though I'd refused to help a desperate man. Predictably, strangers rushed to judge. Daniel watched the comments while I made coffee. Does this bother you? Not yet, I said. Truth usually takes longer than lies. Later that morning, Officer Melissa Grant called to confirm Ethan had been formally warned not to contact me again. She also told me I was free to release my security footage if anyone continued misrepresenting the incident. I did nothing. 2 days later, I didn't have to. One of Ethan's own companions uploaded the complete recording, including their plan to make the confrontation go viral and Ethan's admission that he needed money. Public opinion flipped almost overnight, and the edited videos quietly disappeared. Claire laughed when she called. One of his own friends exposed him. That doesn't surprise me, I said. People stay loyal until they realize they're being used too. A week later, I received another unexpected call. It was human resources from Ethan's former accounting firm. Mr. Brooks recently submitted a written complaint about his resignation, the representative explained. Because he repeatedly referenced you, we'd like to verify several facts before closing our internal review. Daniel glanced over as I put the call on speaker. All right, I said. What would you like to know? The HR representative explained that Ethan had claimed my refusal to help financially contributed to both his resignation and his emotional distress. I almost laughed. So he blamed losing his job on me? That's essentially what he reported. After I ended the call, Claire uncovered the rest through one of Ethan's former co-workers. Apparently, Ethan had been telling different versions of the same story. Sometimes he claimed I'd promised to invest in Olivia's business before backing out. Other times he insisted I'd convinced him to leave accounting altogether. The contradictions became so obvious that even his co-workers stopped believing him. He's trying every explanation except the truth, Claire said. The truth isn't one he wants to admit. By early summer, Ethan's world had shrunk. Friends had stopped answering his calls, former colleagues kept their distance, and attorneys investigating Olivia's finances were still contacting him because his name appeared on multiple financial documents. I heard everything secondhand, but by then my own life had already moved on. Daniel and I decided to leave Portland and eventually found a small photography studio overlooking the Oregon coast. It wasn't perfect, but the moment I stepped inside, I knew it was home. Within 2 months, we had moved in. Daniel worked remotely from the upstairs office while I rebuilt the studio downstairs. Our days settled into a routine of coffee, ocean air, and quiet work, the kind of peace I'd spent years searching for. One rainy afternoon, I found the silver car key still attached to its original dealership tag. The future I almost gave away, I said. Daniel smiled. Not anymore. I looked at him. It belongs to the woman who chose herself. For the first time, the key no longer reminded me of Ethan. It reminded me how far I'd come. Nearly a year after Ethan left, the studio was thriving. Local families booked portrait sessions. Tourists bought landscape prints and hotels began displaying my work. While organizing old paperwork one afternoon, I found the purchase documents for the silver crossover. The car was still in storage. I think it's finally time, I said. That weekend, we drove back to Portland. The SUV looked exactly as I'd left it, with barely 20 miles on the odometer. As I unlocked the driver's door, I realized I wasn't thinking about Ethan anymore. I was thinking about the woman who had once believed love meant giving everything away. On the drive home, Daniel squeezed my hand. I'm glad we met when we did. So am I. A few weeks later, he surprised me with dinner on the beach and gave me a simple silver keychain engraved, "Every road after this is ours." I replaced the dealership tag with the new keychain without saying a word. Some memories don't disappear. They simply stop hurting. Later that evening, Claire called. One of Ethan's former co-workers ran into him, she said. He accepted an entry-level accounting job several states away and left quietly. Good, I replied. You really mean that? I never wanted his life to fall apart. I just couldn't keep sacrificing mine to hold it together. After the call, Daniel slipped an arm around my shoulders. Everything okay? I smiled at the ocean outside the studio. Better than okay. That winter, our studio hosted a charity exhibition featuring local photographers. As guests wandered through the gallery, I noticed an older woman standing quietly in front of one of my favorite photographs, a narrow coastal road disappearing into the morning fog. The woman smiled at the photograph. This feels hopeful. I joined her. What makes you say that? It reminds me you don't have to see the whole road, she said. You just have to keep moving. After she left, I stood in front of the photograph for another moment. A year earlier, I had believed losing Ethan meant losing my future. Instead, it had led me here. That evening, Daniel and I closed the studio early and drove south along Highway 101 in the silver SUV. The ocean stretched beside us until he broke the comfortable silence. Do you ever think about Ethan? Not really. Then what do you think about? I smiled. The woman standing in that parking lot with a car key, convinced she'd lost everything. What would you tell her now? I'd tell her the greatest decision she ever made wasn't buying the car. What was it? Keeping the keys. Daniel squeezed my hand. I hope so. Months later, Claire called after hearing from mutual friends. They ran into Ethan, she said. He's working again, renting a small apartment and staying out of trouble. I wished him well, not because I'd forgotten what happened, but because I no longer carried it with me. As the coastline unfolded ahead, I glanced at the silver key resting in the center console. I started the engine. Daniel rested his hand over mine. Highway 101 stretched toward the horizon. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of where the road might lead.